Don't hide from God. God is right there in your life. He's like the sun. He's shining his truth out. But you know what we do? We put up barriers. We put up falsities and excuses to block God out. And what life is about is having the courage to take those barriers off and say, no, God, I'm going to look right at you in my life. And wow. Okay, all right. Maybe there's more nuance to this than I thought.
Hey, welcome to the show. Today's episode is how to safely approach God. Why would you even have to think about safety and God? Doesn't God love everybody? Isn't God the one who made us and sustains us? Why would there be any danger in that? Well, think about the sun, because the sun does those things for us physically. I mean, we are absolutely sustained by the sun. If the sun disappeared, you die in so many ways. Not only would you freeze, but also all the plants would die. We need everything from the sun, and it's really great. We love the sun, but our relationship to it is complicated. I know you may be at home saying, I love the sun so much, I would never. Do you have sunscreen? Do you have sunglasses? Do you go in the shade when it's too hot? But then on the flip side, it's like you need the vitamin D, and if you don't see it enough, you get light deprivation. There's this complicated balancing act that we have to have with it because of, it's really good, but it's also really, really powerful. Do you know how hot the sun is? The temperature at the surface of the sun is about 10,000 degrees. And you might be saying, well, are you talking about Fahrenheit or Celsius? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which one I'm talking about. You can't say, oh, well, if it's only 5,000 degrees Celsius, I can handle it. No, you can't. It's infinity degrees. The core of the sun is 27 million degrees. I'm not going to tell you which one because it doesn't matter. The corona around it is millions of degrees. It will fry you to a crisp in an instant, but nothing on the earth could survive without the sun. We have to have the sun, but we need not just sunglasses, but things like mitigating factors like the Earth's atmosphere. Without the atmosphere to mitigate that, we would be toast. The atmosphere is a thin, in case you don't know, it's a thin band of air made up of numerous layers based on temperature. Without this protective blanket, life on Earth would not exist, as it protects us from heat and radiation. By the way, the power of the sun leads to radiation and contains the air that we breathe in it as well. The distance from the sun, we can't be that close. We have to be in what's called the Goldilocks zone. They really call it that. It's because it's not too hot, it's not too cold, so there can be liquid water and life as we know it. You can't just say to the sun, well, let's turn it down a little bit. It has to be powerful enough to sustain the solar system, but there has to be protections on our planet or else we couldn't live. That is the correspondence. That's the metaphor for how the relationship between God and the people in heaven and even us on earth has to work. There is a spiritual Goldilocks zone that we need to be in because of the power of God's love. Love is real. It's an actual thing with actual power, just like nuclear fission or fusion or whatever it's going on in the sun is real. So today we're going to look at that, what the spiritual Goldilocks zone is, and how in the afterlife you can choose whether you turn toward God as the spiritual sun or stay looking at the physical sun. You can't get how all this works if you don't understand that divine love has power. I'm not talking about power like the power of love. I'm talking about actual power. So if you look at the physical solar system, we know that there's got to be a sun that's pumping out all the energy that makes it work, and then there's got to be something that receives. There's a planet, in this case planet Earth, receiving that power, and the combination of those two and the mitigation by the nature of the earth of that power makes it so there can be a place where life exists. As we talked about in the last episode, there's a sun in the spiritual world. There is a spiritual sun. You can look up and see a sun, but it's not made out of hydrogen and stuff. It's made out of divine love. God's divine love looks like the sun. In Heaven and Hell 120, Swedenborg says, we can gather how great divine love is and what its quality is by comparison with the sun of our world. That love is most intense, far more intense if you will believe it. You remember in the last scene when I was saying the sun is like 1 trillion degrees and we were joking about it? You're like, yeah, it was so powerful. Everyone knows, like, yeah, you would get fried if you went close to that. But anyway, let's talk about love. Love is not that powerful. Love is actually, in the spiritual world, more energetic than nuclear fusion is, that makes the sun in the physical world. That's the power of divine love. And that's actually good. It's good that God is that powerful, because God, the creator, or divine love itself, has got to be powerful enough to sustain the entire spiritual universe and the entire physical universe and every person and living thing that's in it. So God's really powerful and is too powerful in essence for anybody to say, I'm going to stand right here. I'm going to reach out and high five you, because again, it is more than 1 million degrees like the sun is. Swedenborg says it this way in Heaven, Hell 120. The Lord as the sun does not flow directly into the heavens. Rather, the intensity of his love is by degrees tempered in its course. The stages of this tempering look like sparkling halos around the sun. Further, angels are shielded by a suitably thin cloud so that they will not be hurt by the inflow. There are spiritual atmospheres. Just as there are protective physical atmospheres around planets, there's spiritual atmospheres in these levels of heaven which are suited to each kind of heaven. Because we have different sorts of objects. If you look at this like a spiritual solar system, in this level of heaven, there are particular kinds of human beings, which are now called angels. And they are suited to receiving a certain part of the Lord's love. And so they have an atmosphere that they live in that mitigates enough, lets through enough that they get their Goldilocks zone, their spiritual Goldilocks zone there. Spiritual angels have a different kind of receptivity. And so they have an area that's suited for them. Can you see where this is going? Same thing with the natural or outermost angels. Same thing even with people who are in what Swedenborg calls the hells. All of us, depending on how into love and truth we are, find ourselves comfortable and able to live at differing distances from love itself and truth itself. Swedenborg goes on in Heaven, Hell 120. The higher heavens, being in the good of love, are closest to the Lord as the sun. These people eat love for breakfast, kind of. So they're comfortable with high degrees of exposure to love. It's like when you go up on a mountain and there's less atmosphere there. The first time I went to Yellowstone National Park, and my friend and I were like, well, let's just go hiking, no problem. We don't need sunscreen, it's not that hot of a day. And we got totally sunburned because there's less atmosphere there. You get a lot more sun there. These people can handle that. They're closer to the Lord because they can let more of that in. The lower heavens, though, being in the good of faith, are farther from him. People who are engaged in nothing good whatever, like the people in hell, are farthest away, their removal being in proportion to their opposition to what is good. And the removal is not God saying, yuck, get away from me. You're doing things that are evil. Even though people who are doing things that are evil, it's aggravating and frustrating for me and for the rest of us. God still loves everybody all the time. But people who are opposed to love in the way that they act and are would not be happy close to that love. They would get spiritual sunburn. So the levels of hell, the levels of heaven, all of this is to create the environment in which you get the right amount of exposure to love and truth that you can handle and that you can live in. So all of this is just God saying, I want everyone to be as happy as they can be. So if you don't want to be close to me, if you're not into love and truth, that's fine. I got a spot where there's still gonna be some, because I want to keep you alive, but you won't have to have any more than you want. Okay, I mean that seems fair and good. It's a little bit, I don't know, sad or something though, because even angels who are saying, oh, I want to be close to God. I love that. Like, you don't have to, but there's plenty of people who are like, I want to get close to God. Does that mean because it's just God is too electrified or whatever, you can't get close? It would always be, oh, there's God way up in the sky. I wonder what it'd be like to hang out with God face to face. Actually, that can't happen, because God has ingenious ways of further mitigating and making safe the connection between a finite being and this love and truth powerhouse that he is. So we're going to look at those ways in the next section. So God is like the sun. God has the kind of power on the scale. God's love has power on the scale that the sun has physical power. But there is a difference between the sun and God. The sun doesn't have a brain. Sun doesn't think about anything. The sun doesn't care about anything. But God, despite having this intense radiance like a celestial body, God is a person. So God can love people and think about things. And even if the full-on essence of God is beyond our ability to interface, it would fry our circuits, God has ways, because the intention of the divine is to conjoin with us and give us the happiness that he wants to give us. So God has ways to to tamp that down, step it down to where we can interact with God in a one-on-one fashion. Swedenborg says in Heaven and Hell 121, when the Lord appears in heaven, which happens quite often, okay, good. I would think that's how it should be. He does not appear clothed with the sun, but here's God, but in an angelic form, meaning the human form, distinguishable from the angels by the divine quality that shines from his face. He is not actually there in person, since the Lord in person is always clothed with the sun, but is present in appearance. It looks like hey, what if God was one of us? No. He is, but you can tell by what's shining out of his face. Like, this is not just a person, this is God. And the way that it's done is God is taking advantage of or using a common phenomena in the spiritual world, which is that things are in a certain place, but they can appear in other places. So God actually is in the sun. That is where God is located. That the distance from everyone that he needs to be in order for them to have the right balance of love and wisdom. Like I was just talking about in the last section. Why weren't you listening in the last section? But he can go appear right where you are. This is actually a common thing in the spiritual world. He says in Heaven and Hell 121, it is commonplace in heaven for things to be seen as though they were present in the place where their appearance is focused or delineated, even though this is very far from the place where they themselves actually are. This presence is called a presence of inner sight. That might seem strange and bizarre and alien, but not really. The idea of being able to do something like that, even though none of us can actually do it, has absolutely permeated pop culture. For example, Luke Skywalker does that very same thing. You know, there's like in one of the new Star Wars movies, and he's having this battle with this guy, and the guy is not good. And the guy's like, I stabbed you. But he's like, actually you didn't, because the whole time he was meditating on spoiler alert. The whole time he was meditating on this rock. And come on, the movie is many years old now. He's meditating on the rock, and that nobody bats an eye at that. They get what it is. Oh yeah, he's there, but he can project himself to being where he is. It's kind of like what's happening right now. You're just like in your normal life, and I'm like projecting through your phone or your computer or whatever. The spiritual world is where we get the impulses to think that kind of thing can happen, and then probably the inspiration to develop the technologies where it's becoming a reality here. So there is this, God can appear as an avatar, so you can experience him without getting burned up. In other places, Swedenborg describes a mechanism where God can come close to people by filling a particular angel, filling someone up with his presence in order to be there but be mitigated through this person. This is how in the Bible there will be the angel of the Lord appeared to so-and-so, and God is able to speak through this angel to people because somehow the way the physics of it works, we can be open to God's influence in a way that he can come out to other people. Swedenborg saw God appearing in a variety of ways. Here's some examples. He said, I have seen the Lord outside the sun in an angelic form overhead, a little below the sun, and also nearby in a similar form, once even among some angels, looking like a fiery ray of light. If you think about it, that's what Jesus Christ was. Jesus was God having a way to be present with us, like an avatar among us, a way that the unknowable Father could safely walk among people on earth, and you could sit there and learn things from him, and he could rip up bread and give it to you. God is very interested in connecting with us, and so has the means, has the technology to be able to do it, but always with an eye toward, is my presence around you gonna be good for you? But the Almighty God, the God as he really is always there in the afterlife, is always present, and when you're there, you can actually see him. That doesn't mean, though, that you have to see him or focus on him if you don't want to. There is an alternative. It's always all about freedom. God is there and super powerful, but you don't have to look at God. That's not a requirement. So while we're here on earth, the physical sun is a correspondence of God's love and care. So just like you see the sun undeniably powering the ecosystems that you depend on for food and making it so the temperature is okay for you to live and all that, God is doing the same thing for us spiritually. Once we cross over into the spiritual world, and this gets a little bizarre, once we cross over into the spiritual world, then you're supposed to focus on the spiritual sun, obviously, because it's doing the same thing there, and there's God inside of it. Interestingly, people in the spiritual world can still be, according to Swedenborg, aware of the physical sun, like the sun that we see here. He says in Heaven and Hell 122, to angels, our world's sun looks like something murky opposite to heaven's sun, and our moon like something dim opposite to heaven's moon consistently. So in the afterlife, there are two lights. Or I guess, one real light, which is God. And then there's something murky and dim that is in the place of our sun. So in the afterlife, the spiritual sun corresponds to love for and from the Lord, which encompasses loving the entire human race. The physical sun corresponds in the afterlife to love only for ourselves, or loving ourselves above all. I mean, you can love yourself, that's fine, but it's supposed to be in service of something bigger. It's not, if it's the main priority, if you believe you're the most important thing in the universe, that's like spiritual darkness. That's like looking toward spiritual darkness. It's the opposite of divine order. In Heaven and Hell 122, it says, anything that is opposed to divine love and truth is darkness to angels. This is why in the Word, worshiping our world's sun and moon and bowing down to them means loving oneself and the distortion that arises from self-love, and why these are to be abolished. When you get to the afterlife, what you focus on is everything. What rules your life of everything. And if you come to have it, so you facing toward, meaning loving and orienting your life toward a love for the human race and the desire to do good to all and the happiness of not just yourself, but everyone. That's like looking toward the spiritual sun. But if you want to focus only on your own happiness and inevitably happiness at the expense of others, or sometimes even happiness because you're making others less happy, you're ruling over them, that is a turning and a focus toward the place that the physical sun occupies in the spiritual world. Really, if you look, heaven and hell is just an orientation thing. If you're oriented toward the Lord as the sun, you're in heaven. If you're facing away, then you're in hell. Swedenborg says that this is because everybody in hell is self-centered. They look away from the whole and toward themselves. And that is the opposite of looking toward the Lord and toward the center that then feeds everything and wills to get everyone happy and in the place in which they can have the happiest life. So just like that, before I was talking about how you can be in one place, but then manifest yourself somewhere else. Same thing with the direction your spirit is facing. Like people can be there and they walk around and they can look around a room and everything and talk, but there's a true direction that your spirit is facing. And it's either facing toward self-gratification and self-centeredness or toward the divine love for everyone. So even while we're on earth, we're turning our spirit toward one of these lights, toward the love for everyone or toward the love for ourselves alone. The reason people turn in this way is that in the other life, we all look toward what rules our deeper natures, toward our own loves then. And these deeper natures form the faces of angels and spirits. Not only is it where you turn, but it is the thing that shapes the way your face looks, what you love. We ourselves in spirit are also turning in the same fashion, away from the Lord if we're caught up in self-love and love of the world, and toward him if we are in a love for him and for our neighbor. We are unaware of this, though, because we are in a natural world where the cardinal points are determined by the sun's rising and setting. You don't see this reality, but you're in this reality. So even while we're living here, this spiritual sun that I'm going on talking about, and it sounds like trivia, it's there. Your spirit is in that world right now. It can see, it can feel the effects of the spiritual sun, which is love and truth. And either we're turning toward it, letting it in, or we're like, oh, I don't know, let me get away from that, because that conflicts with the kinds of things I'm trying to do. God is the center of everything. That love is the center of everything. So we can choose whether we face toward the reality, which is that other people are just as much human beings as you are. And so how can you just be happy when we're making other people miserable? Or we just face away and we just like, I don't want to hear it. I just want it, whatever's fun for me, I want to do. And that's the fundamental choice. And it's a choice that we're making right now. And it's a choice that we continue to have in the spiritual world and on forever. God is like the sun. God is like the sun. God is the spiritual sun, and this has an orienting effect. It has a, hey everyone, here's something to focus on, effect. That's really important. This is in Heaven and Hell 124. Since the Lord is the Son of heaven, and since everything that comes from him looks toward him, the Lord is the common center, the basis of all direction and orientation. So too, everything beneath is in his presence and under his control, everything in the heavens and everything on the earth. Because God is this common center that everybody can look toward, it makes it clear that, as we stated in previous episodes, the nature of God is what defines the nature of heaven. Because heaven is just a state of you're looking toward God. So whatever God is like, that's what heaven is like. And God is like the desire that everyone be most fully and profoundly happy. So heaven, it runs on that and mirrors that and feeds on that. Also, the nature of divine love of God and love of the neighbor is emanating out from God. That influences everyone who looks toward it. All of the physical world, nature, including the sun and moon, correspond to the way things are in spiritual reality. So you are getting, just by going out, look at the night sky, look at the day sky, look out at how the world is, you get this masterclass on how spiritual reality works. So all of these things are there to help teach and augment and drive home the reality that God is the center of everything. We depend on God for all of our life, and turning to God is the way that we really can live. And yeah, you got to take some steps to do that safely sometimes, but the steps are there. And as we live, we get more and more able to, I can go out now with less sunscreen on. I'm getting better and better at letting that love in until eventually you're just like soaking it up.